So I will start with the introduction. We have with us today Shalabh Sahai, the co-founder and director of iVolunteer. He is recognized as a leader at the forefront of volunteering development in India. He established iVolunteer Awards in a bid to inspire more people to volunteer and establish benchmarks on volunteering practices across India. Shalabh has also co-founded Jobs for Good, a boutique consultancy on HR advisory and recruitment for social enterprises, NGOs, and CSR portfolios of companies. An alumnus of the prestigious Institute of Rural Management, Anand, IRMA. He was the first Commonwealth Professional Fellow from India in 2003. He has been a visiting faculty at Social Enterprise Cell, NMIMS, and SP Jain Institute of Management and Research, both counted among top Indian B schools. He serves on the advisory board for pro bono initiatives for the CII, Confederation of Indian Industry. An acclaimed representative of volunteering in India, Shalabh is often to speak at global volunteering forums like Points of Light Conference on Servicing and Volunteering USA and Global Conference of International Association of Volunteering Efforts. In India and South Asia, he often addresses students and young professionals on social entrepreneurship in India. He is a Global Council member for Global Pro Bono Network. Welcome, Shalabh Sahai. Over to you.
Thanks, Anand. Maybe some of you could see that I was trying to adjust my laptop, my position in the house, and I think we are all facing very similar situations of trying to adapt to the current normal of working from home. I hope that this webinar is able to bring forth as much of interesting discussion, engagements, and learnings for you as much for me. I do look forward to volunteering, learning more about volunteering with all of you as well. Thank you, Anand.
Welcome, sir.
So, should we begin?
Yes, we can begin.
Okay. So a quick I don't know, show of hands, or in some way, if you can tell us, how many of you find yourselves as people who are single? How many people are single? You just stay by yourself, no family, no kids.
Can we go with the poll?
Yeah, sure. If you can,
yes.
Great.
So there is a polling section. You have these options there. Please answer. Are you able to see the poll, sir?
Yes, I can.
We have an 85% voter attendance.
Great. So if you can, yeah, maybe you can just close the poll and share the output for all of us.
Yes.
Wonderful. So if you can see, so I see that about half of you are married with grown-up children. Quarter of you are single, and then about 15% on people with young children and 15% people with no children. So that's a good mix to have. It's a pretty good mix of people. So thank you for sharing that, Anand. Let me just I'm going to share my screen, and okay, I am Anand, I'm unable to share my screen. I think you need to give me the rights.
Yes, 1 minute. For the time being, I'll make you the host, sir, so that right. I'll I'll make you cost.
Sure. Okay. I hope you're able to see my screen now. Yeah. Uh,
Yes,
can everyone see my screen?
yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So we've just gone through the poll. Second question from all of you: how many of you have heard of iVolunteer? And this is just a question; it is not a poll. So maybe in a chat or something, if you can just say something about it. Anand, can you give me a bit of count about, just a simple sense?
We have about 6 people saying they haven't heard, and
Okay.
about 15 saying
Okay.
they have.
Oh,
More
great. So,
people
okay.
adding they have.
Yeah. So about 2/3 people have heard of iVolunteer and a third have not heard of iVolunteer. So I'll go by introducing you very simply about iVolunteer to begin with, for those who do not know or for those who may have known a little bit about it. So we got established in 2001 as I think India's first platform that connected people to volunteering. We've moved in different phases. Today we engage about 18,000 people, working with almost 600 plus nonprofits that are registered on the platform. And we've moved from engaging volunteers purely in hands-on volunteering, where they would take up direct work, mostly manual volunteering, to skills-based volunteering, where people were sharing more of skills and expertise that they were using functionally in their jobs. And then from there on, moving to advisory services on how to develop better volunteering programs, how to develop volunteering policies. Over a period of time, we've always engaged in helping organizations also train and develop their volunteer management systems and policies. So this is there for both companies and for nonprofits. When I'm sharing here with you today, I'm sharing with you as an experience, not of somebody who purely talks about volunteering or trains volunteer managers. It's about running an organization that provides volunteers to other nonprofits. So that's what I'm going to talk to you a bit about. Uh, the basic concept that we built iVolunteer was on is that volunteering is about being able to choose. Uh, Volunteering is about being able to choose their uh, method of engagement, the nature of engagement, the time and location, and the cause. So it would be, we really are agnostic of the causes that a volunteer chooses, agnostic of the time and location that a volunteer chooses. So imagine that, a volunteer says that I want to celebrate my birthday. That's once in a year. Versus a volunteer says that I want to engage on an ongoing basis every day of the week or every second Saturday of the week. Or a volunteer who says, well, I want to give up 1 year of my time and engage as a full-time volunteer for a non-profit, whether it is in India or outside. So we want the volunteers to have a choice. Second is, there are tons of causes, the way you define them or the way sustainable development goals are defined, or it used to be MDGs earlier. We expect some of them volunteers do not even understand. So we try and make it very, very simple for volunteers to be able to choose a cause. And the nature of engagement. What do I mean by nature of engagement is that a skilled volunteer might choose a very simple way of engaging, let's say a finance whiz, choosing simply to go and clean the beach. That's his choice. So a nature of engagement need not necessarily be defined by the volunteer seeking organization or by iVolunteer. It is the volunteer's choice. So in a simple way, we say that no, the volunteers choose whether it is the cause or the time and location or the nature of engagement. But what we are talking about today, and what's in a way we're being forced to increasingly think about is virtual volunteering. Uh, and when I talk about virtual volunteering, uh, think of how you would actually do so. How many of you volunteer virtually?
We have a poll.
If you have a poll, you can publish it, or you can. Yeah,
Yes, we have a poll.
fantastic.
Participants can please vote just like the one before. We give it another 5 seconds. Yes, so 80, these are the results.
Okay, great. So almost half of you have never undertaken virtual volunteering, and of the rest of the people, okay, a little more than one third of you have never volunteered virtually. Um a little over one third of you have volunteered sometimes, and about one fifth of you, 1 out of 5 of you, always chooses virtual volunteering. Uh, so thanks for this poll. Okay. Uh, do you know how old is virtual volunteering? So one of the first projects of virtual volunteering is called as the Project Gutenberg. So it's almost 30 years old, and you can look up Gutenberg.org to look at what does it do basically. So for a long point of time, the books were available only in the print format, and they were available only for people to buy. Uh, Now, the Project Gutenberg actually took on the task of saying that let's digitize the books and archive the cultural works and make it available as ebooks for large number of people to read. And that's a very early example of volunteering, because Project Gutenberg was not a company that employed people. It basically depended upon a lot of volunteers across the world uh, to help them digitize these books, and then to help them construct this library, and then to help them distribute and disseminate the works over there. Interestingly, iVolunteer has just begun a very similar project. It is called Audio Stories. So we realize that people are sitting back at home, and uh, they're spending more time with their families. They're restricted to their house, which is also working as an office, which is also working as possibly a learning center for the children. People are spending more time with their families. And at the same point of time, there's a large number of people who are, children out there or underprivileged out there, who are unable to access stories. So one of the basic methods of learning is being able to read and listen to stories. So we got this concept of audio stories, and in audio stories, we invite just any one of you can actually think of a story that your grandma told you, or your mother read out to you, or if you read out with your children currently in the form of storybook, and maybe record it as an audio story. You could do it by yourself. You could actually engage your two children to play certain roles, and you create an audio story using 3 characters, each being played by different family members. Or maybe there are 3 of you who are friends staying together, and you could actually take on one role each and create an audio story like that. And these audio stories are then available in a free, license free way for anyone to read out there. Now, by doing so, we are able to ensure that people staying at home are able to take on a very, very simple virtual volunteering task that is interesting, that connects to their people around them, and that is helpful to somebody out there. You can do it in any language. So we have stories in Hindi, in Marathi, in English, and of course more. Even Tamil, I think we have stories right now. So we've put down a target of saying that let's be able to create 10,000 audio stories during this lockdown period itself. If we're able to create 10,000 audio stories by possibly at least 5,000 volunteers who are contributing to create these stories, then we actually engage 5,000 virtual volunteers, and these 10,000 stories might be usable by lakhs of individuals out there. So I see it as a beautiful way of virtual volunteering, but it is not what you normally think of virtual volunteering. So what do you normally think of virtual volunteering? Uh, and before we get over there, I missed the slides in the middle. So the challenge today is that most of us try to think of virtual volunteering in a very Western or European style of way. Let's try and rethink how will it work in the Indian context. How will it work in the current context where there are COVID times where you need to boost relief, boost engagement of people. So what is virtual volunteering? In a very simple way, the established thing is that you expect people to use computers to directly benefit someone. You use computers or you use internet, and everybody I speak to you says you use internet or you speak computers. However, if you were to simply dissect this word virtual volunteering, then volunteering basically means doing something for the benefit of others, as simple as that. And virtually means that you do something without being physically present with them, right? So in a simple way, virtual volunteering is about being able to help others without being physically present. It does not necessarily mean that you have to use computers. It does not mean that you necessarily have to use internet. So simple ways of virtual volunteering that are becoming popular today are, for example, using, you would have heard about a lot of states that are taking up the task of education through two very popular mediums. One popular medium is using TV to be able to broadcast lessons for the children who do not have access to personal laptops and computers at home. People in low-cost English medium schools or government-run schools. So being able to access that. The second is using WhatsApp as a medium, or being able to make calls to children and being able to mentor them over a phone, which a basic phone, which is not even internet related. So how do we actually move to very, very basic concept of volunteering, which can be done without being virtually present, and not necessarily requires us to use high technology, high tech, computers or internet or high bandwidth. So those are some of the things that we need to think about. And I took that as one example. eVidya Loka obviously is a very good example of virtual volunteering where classes are conducted virtually from a distance. But let's move from there to talk about, okay, I've already done this poll, so I'll move to the next one. So we said that volunteering is all about making a difference, but volunteering is making a difference to two different kinds of people. You can make a difference to a non-profit organization that in turn works with the beneficiary. You can make a difference to the volunteer and to the company as well. Now the benefit to the non-profit organization are fairly commonplace, and the first thing that strikes your mind, or to the beneficiary. But what is the difference to a volunteer? Now, if you take the example that I just spoke about organizing or doing audio stories, the volunteer in this case is being able to read stories possibly with their family and with their children. They find a time of connecting with their children. They're able to produce something which carries their name outside, because end of the day, the audio story will be listed somewhere on our YouTube platform, for example, with their name. So they're able to share this widely. They're able to practice their oratory skills, which might be useful in the work part of it, whatever their work might be. So that's just an example from audio stories. And then you think about the typical projects of being able to design a brochure when you are a communications professional. Now that gives volunteers a ability to hone their skills, or to go a little bit beyond their the level of skills or the level of work that their company assigns them to. And then, of course, the corporates benefit in a several ways by helping develop leadership, by helping develop camaraderie between their team members, and by helping develop soft skills that are there in individuals, because volunteering gets us to go out there and talk to people, work in situations that are we're not familiar with. And therefore, we learn the basic skills of being able to connect with people, develop teams, work with in different circumstances. So obviously these are the different benefits that are there. But let's talk about non-profits. How do you define the different kind of services that are there? The first is where we directly help deliver services. The obvious examples are, for example, education, and Evideluca is a good example of being able to teach children. And mostly when we think of virtual volunteering, we simply think of how can we do what the NGO already does with the beneficiaries, and how can we use it using technology and virtually. And therefore the example of teaching children using education comes up. But that is not the only one. Think of what will strengthen the organizational reach and effectiveness. The common examples, if you think of any NGO, it has the same organizational functions that a company or any organization, not just a non-profit, has. These include human resources and development. It requires accounting and finance. It requires marketing and communication. It requires use of technology. So there are all these different functions, which means that every company or every professional out there actually has a certain skill that can also be used by a non-profit organization. So think of an example. Let's talk about communication. And we recently did a very, very simple virtual volunteering project where we got a set of volunteers to develop different formats of annual reports. Now we're sitting and this was in April last month. So we're sitting at the end of the financial year, and most nonprofits find themselves in a conundrum where they're able to be working on their annual reports and publishing annual reports at this point of time. But currently, they do not have the ability to produce and to work on them. So we simply asked a couple of people to help design a certain number of templates. Now, when these templates are there, it's easy for somebody responsible for publishing annual reports in an NGO to publish those annual reports, and it comes under communications. Now, at the end of the day, it helps strengthen the organizational reach and effectiveness. There are several examples. For example, as an HR professional, can you design um, a training program where new joinees to an NGO can be given um, an induction training virtually from home? Now, most NGOs have an induction program in place, but most NGOs do not have an induction program that can be given virtually. Now that's a new need, which is coming up right now. Now, can you as an HR professional do that? Now, what this does is that the HR professional is not just putting their skills to the use for the NGO, and the NGO is getting obviously over there, but also the HR professional is being able to practice skills of delivering such trainings that he can or she can use effectively in their companies as well. And that's a beauty of undertaking tasks which are more about domain and skills expertise, like HR, finance, communication, technology, because they cut across the different market segments, whether you're working with a private organization or a government setup or a small non-profit out there. These skills and their demand remains the same. So that's about strengthening organizational reach and effectiveness. The third and different kind are things which strategically help an organization. So these are not everyday tasks. These are tasks that help an organization rethink of their purpose and build a strategy to respond to the growing organizational needs or the growing challenges that it faces in its work with the community, or to adapt to the environment and the economy around them. Now, these are things that are not done by everyday professionals. These are not done on an everyday basis. These require a certain level of seniority and expertise. These require a certain level of methodical understanding of what the organization does and helping it improve it. So we have a program, for example, called Whiteboard. Now, what Whiteboard does is it engages senior executives from the corporate side to sit as a sounding board, as an advisory board, and we call it a whiteboard, and help an organization, help an NGO rethink their growth, rethink their organizational effectiveness, rethink their communication strategy, rethink how they will build funding, for example, and help grow the organization more effectively. A very recent example of a whiteboard was that, our whiteboard typically meets once in 6 weeks and advises a new nonprofit every time. So the last time that our whiteboard was supposed to meet was actually in the early April, because the previous meeting had happened towards the end of February. Now, early April was, of course, a lockdown period. So our Bangalore whiteboard decided, why do we need to kind of, do this only in person? And when increasingly even corporate board meetings are happening virtually, why can't we do our whiteboard meeting virtually? So the last whiteboard meeting happened virtually. And the beauty of it was that I could join the meeting right sitting here from Mumbai, which I'm not able to do. I've attended only one whiteboard meeting earlier in Bangalore because I'm based in Mumbai, but I was able to do it right from here. And now we are thinking that, we have these whiteboards. So there is a whiteboard in Bangalore, there is a whiteboard in Mumbai, and there is a whiteboard in Chennai, which are able to advise nonprofits in those different locations. But we are now thinking, well, why do we restrict ourselves only to advising organizations which are in that specific location? Why can't I have a whiteboard which picks up members from a Delhi and an Ahmedabad and Hyderabad and Mumbai, but actually takes on a nonprofit working in the Northeast or working in possibly Chhattisgarh, and help them work on certain things. So, so the more we move from towards from kind of operational needs of helping deliver the services of an NGO, to strengthening organizational reach, and thereafter to helping the organization in a strategic way, the ideas, complexities, and the impact that we can have using virtual volunteering increases more and more. And that's been something that we have developed over a period of time. So I want to kind of take a pause over here and ask if you have any question at this point of time.
Any questions can be posted in the Q&A section of this app. You can see a Q&A and all questions can be there. The panelists will be able to see it and answer it.
Okay. I'll just take a moment more for people to. Okay. So there's a question that is coming in. How open are NGOs to get consultants or volunteers involved in their operation strategy? Very open. I think it will depend very much on. Okay. Okay. So it's a simple question, but the answer is pretty simple as well. So NGOs are pretty open. It depends upon how are you able to generate a confidence with that NGO. So imagine that somebody comes into you running an organization, and somebody comes into you randomly whom you never met, never know, and who says that I want to help you, and you say that okay, I can help you guys, and then suddenly you disappear the next day after having received the maximum information from an NGO. So typically the risk of opening strategically to for a non-profit are high. And so what happens is that the NGOs will mostly look at your previous engagements as a volunteer, possibly do a reference check. Have you volunteered earlier, and whom have you volunteered with? How was that experience? And then move to the next level of sharing a little bit of, giving smaller projects to you, where you can deliver your volunteering and your expertise. And if you stand true to your word, if you actually deliver good quality of volunteering output to the NGO, then they might give you a little more deeper and more strategic work. So I think NGOs also take it step by step, piece by piece, give a smaller bite. If the NGOs feel that you're worthy of it, they move you to the next level. So obviously that's what it is. Okay. There is somebody saying that I'm interested in the concept. Interested in the concept of storytelling audibles. How can I go about doing it? Are there any guidelines? So I will just kind of take a moment to share different projects that we have listed on our website. Okay. Second. Okay, so I want to take this thing. So we developed something like this called as do it yourself to volunteer from home. Now we realized that volunteers all sitting back at home, and this was when the the lockdown one had happened, where they said that there were 21 days of 21 days of lockdown. So we said we developed quickly 21 DIYs to volunteer from home. These had these different ideas, Tring Tring, Party Corona. Basically, we gave them a slightly funky and a fun name to volunteer with. We thought of something that would be simple enough for people to do from their home, and activities that could be directly used by the NGO or would be useful in general to the media. Now, what we did over here is, so you can look at all of these, and there is something on audio stories. So if you apply for that particular one, I'm trying to look at trying to find the one which is over here. Yeah, here. Once upon a time. So this is the one. Now, if you were to just select this particular one, then it opens up into the audio stories thing. So you can just go over here and it tells you what you need to do. So for example, read and record 21 short stories for visually impaired children. You can pick up stories from Panchtantra, Jatak Tales, or even in English like Aesop's Fables, anything at all. Send us the audio file and then we post it on the YouTube. So if you're interested, you can just look at the iVolunteers YouTube section over here, and you'll be able to see all these audio stories. You see these? So these are audio stories, Akbar and Birbal, right from Little Pigs, and Shyamchi Ai, which is in Marathi. So different audio stories that have been contributed by different volunteers. So we realized that this became increasingly a very, very popular platform. We're increasingly getting more and more stories from people who are contributing to these. If you wish to kind of record them, just go over here, apply, and you can actually apply with your team also. You can set up a team of your family, of your colleagues, of your friends, and apply as a team, or you can just apply by yourself as well. So those are some of the different ways that you can volunteer. I just want to quickly take a check on the skills-based volunteering things as well. So you can pick up examples like social media marketing, and an engagement program leader. You can also pick up the virtual volunteering piece over here. So these are the different virtual volunteering opportunities that we have in this one. So yeah, a whole lot of different guidelines that exist. So I'll move back to the presentation that I was running and come back to the questions once again, because I think the last question that was there was about are NGOs prepared to engage with our volunteers? And there are several challenges over there. So I want to talk about the several challenges that we're working on. Give me a second, I'm trying to find my presentation. Anant, were you able to see my my presentation earlier?
Yes, we were able to see it. Yes, I was able to see it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, okay, great. You're able to see that right now again, right? Okay, great. So we had spoken about virtual volunteering, and I spoke about different ways to volunteer and making a difference now. Okay, let's come to the challenges part of it. So, like the last question that I addressed was about are NGOs open to work engaging volunteers on their strategy? So there are several challenges that are there with the NGO when we work with them. The first is, let's think of the availability and capacity of our team. Now there are team members who are, in the current scenario at least, the NGOs themselves are struggling to be able to continue their operations. And they're not prepared to engage with volunteers in a virtual manner. Now in such a scenario, when we think of the usual rules of virtual volunteering, it becomes difficult for the NGO to engage with them directly. So imagine that, for example, let's take the example of my own organization. So our head office is in Delhi. and we have a accounts person, like an accounts manager who looks after different things. Now, supposing I want to engage somebody who wants to help a bit better financial management system or a better uh, analysis of our current financial capability. And obviously every organization is reassessing their finances. And I want to engage a senior volunteer who can help us do that. And I connect him to my accounts manager. The challenge is that my accounts manager last visited the offices 2 months back, and his primary computer with the hard disk is there in the office. And accounts people don't usually use laptops, they use computers. Now he has a laptop available at his home through which he's able to continue the organization work on an ongoing basis. But can he provide all that information that might be required for such a task? Difficult. So that is the challenge of engaging with the team members right now. The second is the NGO's team members are actually sitting in their different locations. Now, do they have access to uh, a machine, their own work files, and actually a space to work inside in their homes? So a lot of non-profit professionals actually work from small homes. They live in small homes, which is shared with several people, and several tasks are happening at the same point of time. Now, do you have a silent corner to be able to find a space to work? Do you have enough bandwidth to be able to do it? In my own home, we have 2 children who have online classes happening, and my wife is working online, I'm working online. Or do I have enough bandwidth to support all of this kind of work? So I think availability and capacity of individual team members becomes a challenge. And I'm talking in the current times. But the same availability and capacity of the team to engage with volunteers is also a challenge on an ongoing basis. And those are things that you have to consider. But there are other things as well. So think of the scoping challenges. Now, typically when we ask an NGO to give us a project, let's say we say that, can you give us a project? Typically NGOs will come up and say, I have a problem on communication, or I want somebody to help us with our marketing. We say, great, give us a project on marketing that you need a specific help on. And the NGO will give you a project that will possibly take a full-time 3-people team 6 months to work in order to develop and handle everything on their marketing. Now, that is not how a marketing project will typically work with volunteers, because volunteers need small bite-sized things. So scoping of a project becomes the first difficult task. And you will find very easily a lot of platforms, a lot of companies wanting to work with NGOs suddenly say that, we can help you on skills-based volunteering projects. But at iVolunteer, we take these simple steps. We say that first you have to think of a need which an NGO is able to. A lot of times we actually have to impregnate the thought of a need. So we usually ask an NGO and they will say, well, I'm an education-based organization, I need teachers. But then you start talking to them about human resource development, you start talking to them about team challenges, income parity, then you start talking to them about being able to assess and keep a tab of the progress of students, and then they start thinking of different needs. So first, help them think of needs. Second, help them develop these needs into volunteerable projects. What do I mean by volunteerable projects? So projects, if they are too long and require a volunteer to commit almost all of their time, then you will find very small number of volunteers, capable volunteers who can take up those projects. So you need to be able to cut these down into series of multiple small projects that individual volunteers or teams of volunteers can take up. Next is being able to speak in a language. Now, all of us, including in the non-profit sector, speak a very development-oriented language. And it's the same true for everyone. So you talk to a person in the creative team, or you talk to a person in the technology team from the technology industry, and they have their own languages. Now, the languages that NGOs speak and the languages that those people speak are different languages. We have to be able to write our project in a language that volunteers understand. And then you have to write it in a manner that interests people. Even if I have a great need, I've developed a project and I have written it in a manner in which people can understand, but still I do not reach it to different audience, then nobody's going to apply for it. Nobody's going to be interested in helping me with it. So then you have to market it in a manner such that it's interesting to people and they apply for it. So what iVolunteer does is we help people do all of these. We help nonprofits think through and work through all of these steps to come across with projects that volunteers can go for. Having created a project, and let's say we found the volunteers and several volunteers have applied, but then the next problem comes in, which is of project management. So the first thing is, let's say 10 volunteers have applied for the same project that I have as a nonprofit. How do I select those volunteers? From those 10 volunteers, which is the 1 or 2 that who are going to work with me on it? And what am I going to do with the other 8 volunteers? So the selection and engagement of the volunteer becomes the next big challenge. Now, supposing we talk of a communication-based project where a volunteer is supposed to design a brochure. Like these are usual times I would say, well, will the volunteer be required to come to office to make this brochure? If he's required to come to office, do you have space in the office? Do you have a machine that the volunteer can work on? So what is the support available for the volunteer? If the volunteer was to say that I need original photographs and original content to be able to create a very nice brochure, do you have original photographs? Do you have that original content to work on? So what is the support available to the volunteer? And then moving from there to the next level, what is the training or orientation that we provide to the volunteer before getting started? So in the same project, do we have a branding guideline that we can share with the volunteer? Can we share with the volunteer our previous brochures so that they take a clue of what our volunteering, of what our brand is about before they actually start designing something? A lot of times we get, volunteers who do not have that guidance, and they simply they design things that become unusable for the organization. Ongoing calibration is needed. So you can't suddenly come, expect the volunteer after 1 month to come and deliver you the project. You have to keep on checking in the middle at how is the project going. Do you need to do any design changes? I don't like a color. Now, if you tell them that the color will be changed at the very end of the project, then the volunteer sees that, oh, their 1 month of work has gone to waste. So a continued collaboration and calibration of each project is required. Usability of the final outcome. Why do volunteers volunteer? Is to be able to be useful to the community and to the society. Now, if I volunteered for a 1 month, I've come out with some project, by the end of the day, it is not used by the NGO. Now, that is the most depressing and discouraging thing for a volunteer. So so an NGO has to think beforehand, how are they going to use that final outcome? So I've got a great brochure, but how will I use that brochure? Do I have the means to be able to go and, let's say the brochure was about fundraising. So how am I going to be able to use that fundraising brochure to reach once again and to new and existing potential funders? So how am I going to use it? And then, of course, appreciating. There's an entire class I do on appreciating and rewarding volunteers. So is the NGO prepared to appreciate volunteers? And finally, if you've spent all of this time into engaging a volunteer, you don't want to lose the volunteer at the end of the project. You want to re-engage the volunteer to do something else. So what is up next? Is there a growth path for volunteers? And therefore, engaging volunteers on projects requires all of these things. And all of these are challenges with the NGO, with most organizations. So at iVolunteer, we try and work on these different elements for helping to develop the capacity of the NGOs to engage with volunteers. Okay. So I'm going to come to the, sorry. So, typically I want to talk about virtual volunteering also in the current scenario. And I really love this little thing that I saw on Twitter yesterday. Says, Baba, will we reach home early if we walk on the runway? Now, the reality today is that the biggest crisis that the country is facing is the migrant crisis. And, all of us know about it. You know about it. I know about it. Now, what can we do as volunteers to help people out there? And is there a virtual way of volunteering that actually connects and supports people more in their current challenges than in general? So I want to take this a notch down. We talk about in iVolunteer, we usually talk about high skilled volunteering and what best impact can your volunteering and your skills and your profile have for the nonprofit in the community out there. But at times like these, we are forced to think of what is the most simplest, direct and basic way in which you can help somebody out there. For example, at our home, we started, in the apartment society that we live in, there are a large number of people who are making rotis and chapatis and delivering it to the communities close by. Now, we're obviously physically making rotis and we're delivering it to people somewhere out there. But actually, we're not directly interfacing with the volunteers. We're not physically going and distributing those rotis. If somebody is stitching masks somewhere out there and is helping to send those marks to somebody, then again there is no the organization is not directly receiving or interfacing with the volunteer, but is definitely benefiting from the volunteers having produced and sent those masks. Or in the simplest way, for example, we realize at iVolunteer that we have a very strong connect with the with a large number of NGOs who engage with the migrants, and we have a good connect with corporates and volunteers who are willing to help. So we started a crowdfunding campaign, two different crowdfunding campaigns actually. One crowdfunding campaign was okay. I'm just going to stop this particular share and see if I can um share the other thing we were talking about. Yeah. So we thought of of two different um, examples. One was this cash relief project, and we realized that putting cash into people's pockets is makes them the gives them the ability to help themselves the best. And so we started this crowdfunding campaign. Now, can volunteers actually help support and uh, increase the reach of this crowdfunding campaign so that more funds are available for people to be directly used? Or can volunteers help us identify migrant populations in different locations so that we can reach that help more directly? Or we had this other one called supply of food ration and essentials relief. So we started putting together packets of food essentials like rice, atta, dal, tel, things like those, and we can help these. So again, there were two different kinds of help that were required. One is can people help fundraise and increase the outreach, or can help people again identify and help with the distribution element of it. So those are the more essential ones. Now, these are not the regular things that we do, but we realize that in the current COVID times, it is important for us to be able to think afresh. And so I would kind of, encourage and implore all of you to think of volunteering in the current times in very, very different ways. So yeah, I'll end with this and open to questions again. So
We have some
okay, so last
Q&A.
15 minutes. So I'm going to look at some of the questions over here. Please keep posting. There's a question on which tools we can use for effective team management. So yeah, so the simple answer to this is you can use obviously technology-based tools for effective team management. So you can use things like Trello, which is a project management and a team management tool. You can use things like I'm forgetting the name for it. Okay, I'll send you the name separately on it. But you can use as but we find that, for example, it's very simple and important for us, for our team to be working the way they were used to working, which was together, meeting everyone together. And so we use this tool Zoom, which we are currently holding this webinar on. Or you can also use Skype, you can also use a WhatsApp video call. But the team currently needs an ability to connect with each other. And I think that's the first thing. And then we move on to more effective tools. So answer to this will depend upon team to team. Tools are available. It's more about, does it suit you? I'm interested. Okay, I've answered this question of storytelling. How do you source an NGO that wants volunteers? Do you want help with that? At times you volunteer for the first time. Well, typically NGOs do apply to us. So we don't have a dearth of NGOs that want volunteers. We have almost 600 plus NGOs that are registered on our platform right now. Having said that, we're always happy to, we will be more than happy if you're able to refer to us NGOs who want volunteers, who have specific needs. It's, you'll find very often that organizations and platforms and corporate bodies that work with NGOs typically look for credibility of organizations when they're looking to engage their people. But we at iVolunteer believe that just being a credible organization does not make them a volunteer-friendly organization. A credible organization actually has to be able to put in certain amount of efforts to engage the volunteers and be willing and more open to working with volunteers in order to become a volunteer-friendly organization. And so if you have an organization that works exceedingly well with the volunteers, please help them connect to us and we'll be happy to take them on board. If you want to learn more about how to be in a volunteer-friendly organization, connect with me and we'll be able to support you on that. There's a question on virtual volunteer learning. How will we implement it? Gives you maximum result or partial? Virtual volunteering gives you, does it give you maximum results or partial results? Who's the you over here? If I'm an NGO, it can give me maximum results, because most often as an organization, I believe I will benefit most by people giving more of their time in a um, in something that they feel they're an expert in. For example, can they help me design a very good HR policy and actually help me look at new ways of appreciating my employees, not just by actually increasing their salary. Now, if an NGO could actually help me over there, that would be supremely useful. That will give me the maximum result. But is that something that the volunteer will drive maximum satisfaction from? Maybe not, because virtual volunteering gives you a great way to be useful to a NGO and at your own time and pace. But sometimes it falls short of being able to personally connect with people and communities and having that feel that, okay, I was, just that emotional appeal is sometimes lesser when it comes to virtual volunteering. So I think somewhere over there is a partial element of it. Since employees at corporates are engaged in skills-oriented tasks, they mostly look out for volunteering activity which are exciting and fun. What such activities will you propose? Oh, I gave an example right there of being able to record audio books and stories. But there are several other things that we do. So, for example, we think that when we think of working with children, okay, let me just say this: 80% of our volunteers want to volunteer with children, and 80% of those volunteers, when they think of volunteering with children, they think of teaching, which effectively means that 64%, 80 into 80. So, that's 64, right? Yeah. So 64% of volunteers actually want to teach children. But then when we come to the next question of teacher needs to be regular in teaching children, and teaching also takes a certain specialization and certain amount of patience and ability to work with children. Do you have them? And most often we find that they do not have it. So what is a different way of working with children and still ensuring that they learn and develop for a brighter future? There are different ways. You can help them understand technology. You can help them understand different career options. You can help them understand the importance of teamwork. Many of these are possible in a fun way. For example, just go out there and organize a cricket match, as simple as that, between groups of children. Now, when you put people into teams, which are mixed teams of volunteers and children together, they learn several things. Children try and copy what the volunteers, how volunteers behave. So in the manner in which you dress, in the manner in which you talk, in the manner in which you lead a team, the manner in which you collaborate with the team are all things for children to learn. Our children learn these from us. And children who are underprivileged, who are looking out for role models, might be able to learn in such fun and exciting way as well. What exactly should an NGO expect from a volunteer, and are they underperforming volunteers too? Of course. So what should an NGO expect? I think expect a volunteer to be a human. A whole lot of times we expect our volunteers to be angels. And I would say that, because the expectations of an angel, but most volunteers are humans. So the volunteers seem to be underperforming. If you lower down your expectation, you think that, okay, here is a volunteer who's coming to us because they are sincere in their want to help, but they also have family, they also have work, they also want to have a nice fun time, they also make mistakes, they also need encouragement, they also need support, they may fail to turn up sometimes, and I should be as forgiving to them as I am to my employees and to possibly children at home or to friends that I work with. Then your expectations are more at parity with volunteers, and your chances of underperforming volunteers are reduced. I recently involved in summer camps virtually for children. Can I help children for their education virtually? Best example out there, I think, connect with eVidya Loka. And of course, iWorld is happy to help you with other options to help children with their education virtually as well. So please feel free to connect with us directly. Okay, I'm going to start from a little bit of bottom now. Why are volunteers not able to sustain volunteers? How does one make the volunteer at least accountable for a short period? So I think the answer to sustaining volunteers, mostly we think, lies outside. That why aren't we getting accountable volunteers? But like I said previously, a good amount of deal lies in how much are we as an NGO investing in engaging volunteers. We expect that the volunteers will simply come, do the task and go. But no, like I said, volunteers are human. Are you providing them a very loving, enabling, welcoming environment? Um, First, to understand our organization, get inspired by our work, connect with our team members and the work that we do on the ground. Most often, we don't spend enough time in making all that happen. It's only when I'm inspired and I'm engaged that volunteers actually remain longer with us. So one of the simplest ways of, we run this program called Whiteboard, right? And in Whiteboard, it's a very strategic volunteering. Now, we cannot get a strategic volunteer to help to begin with an NGO and then suddenly disappear. There are high stakes involved. So what we do is we get the volunteers only through reference of existing volunteers. Now, when I'm getting a senior volunteer who's referred by an existing volunteer, my existing volunteer tells me that, oh, this is a friend of mine and I think he'll be great at a requirement that you have. So I know about the volunteer, a potential volunteer beforehand. The matchmaking has been done beforehand. Also, if this volunteer somehow is not standing up to what I expected of him or her to do, I can reach up to the referee volunteer and ask that, hey, your friend you referred to us is, seems like he's not engaging with us so well. And maybe that volunteer can tell me, oh, there is something going on in his life or at his work that, the volunteer did not tell me, and I will be more aware of it. Or sometimes you could actually say, oh, let me just talk to him, and he could give a buzz to that volunteer and say, hey, I referred you to this NGO and you are not going. Why are you not going? And that might push the volunteer to be working with us. So there are several ways in which you can make volunteers accountable: by inspiring them, by helping them connect with our existing team members and volunteers, um, and by ensuring that they see that their work will be so much useful to us. Uh, how do you check authenticity of NGOs? It could be a front for some other activity. So we do two simple things. First is, like any other NGO, we do a very basic due diligence, which is of the various registration documents. The next level that we do is look at who else is supporting them. If you have funding organizations, reputed corporates that they partner with, then that acts as a proxy that the NGO must be doing good work. But like I said, for us, what is important is how safe and how enabling are they to engaging volunteers. So each of the NGO that we work with in the 7 large cities that we work in, Mumbai, Delhi, Kolkata, Hyderabad, Pune, and Chennai, each NGO is visited and met by our volunteer relationship manager. Our team at the iVolunteer Center in each of these locations knows these organizations, spends considerable time with their teams looking at their work, and therefore they're able to vouch for their effectiveness on their ground, their friendliness and wanting of the volunteers, and the safety that you will have. We've never had a problem of safety with any of our NGOs ever in about 18 years of working. So I can just say for that. There's a question on education sector. Have you developed some small apps which can be deployed at rural segments for purpose of teaching? No, we have not developed small apps for delivering teaching, but we do engage volunteers in teaching through our partner organizations, some of them who have online forums, some of them who might be having an app which we, so it's organization by organization. What are volunteers wanting to do in these times, the key trends? Most volunteers are trying to do two things. One is they want to directly help the people out there. So either in delivering relief, so mostly people, we've got a large number of volunteer inquiries from places like Bangalore and Mumbai, where people are, young volunteers say, I want to help deliver snacks and meals and food to the communities. So I think relief is currently top of the mind right now. But the second thing is also volunteers, obviously a much larger number of volunteers want to be in the safety and of their homes, which is perfect, I think, and I would really recommend that you should be in the safety of your homes in the current times. So what kind of simple volunteering that they can do while sitting at home? And therefore we develop those ideas of volunteering from home. Last question, how do NGOs sustain themselves? NGOs sustain themselves by I'm thinking you asking about financial sustainability. So they raise funds from the community that they work with. They raise funds from grants from supporting organizations, and they also sometimes have certain services or products that they sell. For example, greeting cards made by underprivileged community or the handicapped people, that gives them a certain income. So there is an income from services or products. There is grants from grant making and private organizations, and then there are retail fundraising that they do through crowdfunding, etc. So yeah, there we are. Looks like I would have answered most of the questions. There are some questions about iVolunteer. I'll be happy to answer them if you directly write to iVolunteer or to me. My email ID is shalabh@ivolunteer.in, shalabh@ivolunteer.in. You can also check up on ivolunteer.in about everything that we do. So thanks, Anant.
Thank you, Shalabh. We had a great session. A lot of insights into volunteer motivations and what volunteers would want. And on the same part, we also spoke about what NGOs can do to keep them occupied. One thing was they are humans and we should treat them. So these are all amazing insights. Though we know them in a abstract way, you have concretized them by putting them in words. Thank you very much. I take this opportunity to sensitize all the participants to one activity eVidyaloka is doing. eVidyaloka normally connects passionate volunteer teachers to rural government schools using the internet. So through video conference, education happens. This is the model that has been functioning. What the COVID and the lockdown, this pandemic, what it has caused is two things. One is disruption in the possibility of classes, as we see urban, rural, everywhere. The other thing it has done to specifically rural children is, while urban children are somehow connected to their teachers, to their school network, to their peers and all, the rural side is completely disconnected simply due to the lack of penetration of the internet. Not for lack of it in terms of percentage, but in the actual, the children having access to the internet is a challenge. Also, this pandemic has forced a lot of people to migrate. A lot of people in the rural areas to, their vocations have been threatened, their jobs have been threatened. So this has caused a sort of a disturbance in the life in rural India for these children especially, and a lot of them are on the verge of not returning back. So eVidyaloka is taking active efforts to reach out to these people and keep them, keep them connected to this cause of education. So in the same lines, we have started a campaign called Back to eVidya. That is, we want these children to all come back to the schools, the ones eVidyaloka is running, where volunteers teach. So there is a campaign page for this, and I'm just sharing it in the chat. You can have a look at this. To help a child get back to school, please visit this page and look at how you can help us. So that is the thing that we had to say from eVidyaloka's side. And thank you, Shalabh sir, for this amazing session. We have had about close to 80 participants who have been actively watching this and interacting. So here is also iVolunteer's website. You can also have a look at that. And any questions to Shalabh sir, as he said, you can write to them. Thank you very much, everyone, for taking time out on a Saturday morning to attend this session. Thank you very much. We are grateful to have all of you here.
Thank you. Thanks, Anant.
Thank
and
you.
Have a good day, all of you.
Thank you.
Bye.